Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to our Virtual Connect series, where we are bringing the architecture community together across Colorado to talk about issues that are top of mind as they navigate these new waters of the COVID-19 response crisis. We've got a great panel lined up for today. My name is Mike Holtzinger, CEO of AIA Colorado. Today, you're going to earn 1 learning unit for attending the presentation. If you have questions during the webinar, please submit them via the Q&A feature in Zoom. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. Today, we're having a conversation with firm principals who are on the smaller side of the spectrum. We didn't draw a number of where that is, but we've got a great lineup. The range is incredible among this group of people we have here in a variety of market sectors and practice types. And we hope you'll enjoy this conversation. And of course, be a part of the conversation too through your questions and comments in the chat feature and the Q&A section. So without further ado, I'll introduce our esteemed lineup. We have 4 panelists today. The first is Chad Holtzinger. Chad has practiced architecture for more than 20 years. His career has revolved primarily around affordable housing design and mixed-use development in the city of Denver. His unique multidisciplinary approach to design results in innovative, high-performing, enduring architecture. As a Denver native, Chad is passionate about communities where all can thrive. Shopworks Architecture, which he founded in 2013, focuses on urban infill development with an emphasis on affordable housing and buildings supporting individuals experiencing homelessness. So welcome, Chad.
Thank you.
Virginia McAllister is our next panelist. Virginia has gained a diverse portfolio of experience over the course of her career and in the founding of Iron Horse Architects. Her work spans aviation, higher education, infrastructure design, local and federal government, and private development. She's a highly skilled professional and a contributing member to any team, uniquely qualified to coordinate the challenges of multiple stakeholders while leading large project teams. Within architecture, her experience includes design, project management, construction administration, document controls, and quality assurance. Hello, Virginia. We have also Sarah Semple Brown, co-founder and design principal of Semple Brown Design, where she has sustained a high level of design excellence since the firm's establishment in 1982. Semple Brown's award-winning body of work includes several of the state's highest profile buildings and places, such as the L.A. Calkins Opera House, Denver's Larimer Square, Kempton's Bourne Hotel, and many others. A prominent leader in regional design community, she advocates for design rooted in timeless fundamentals and leverages her influence on behalf of the profession. Sarah is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and a board member of the Downtown Denver Partnership, Denver Civic Board. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello.
Larry Sykes is the owner of Sykes Project, a small architecture practice established in 2020. Larry has extensive experience in high-end residential design. He's done a few roles in multifamily and commercial work as well. To combat the relentless solitude of his solo practice, Larry enjoys volunteering in AIA Colorado's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusiveness Committee and the City of Denver's Public Works Committee. Thank you, Larry, for joining us.
Hello.
All right, we'll jump right in. And probably the question that's on everybody's mind is, how is this economic climate different from or similar to previous ones that you've experienced? Let's start with Sarah. As a legacy firm that's been around for a while, you must have started your firm right out of college.
Absolutely. I was 16, I think. No, that's a good intro, because we did start our firm in 1982, which was a recession. It was definitely a big recession at that time. And so, we've learned from that. And, this is not, it's been different in a lot of ways. And, I guess in 82, it seemed like it was much more about a local economy and affecting our local markets and being nimble to kind of react to that. I think, there were a few more recessions after 82, but, I think 2008, that seemed to be one that affected all markets, kind of nationwide. Well, for example, in 82, even though the market in Denver was recessed, there were investors from Chicago that were developers that we were working on a project with, that because they weren't part of our local market, they were able to invest in our local market. So that it really wasn't this broad reaching kind of effect. 2008 seemed to be much more national and maybe international. It kind of, affected all markets. It seemed to be something that we were kind of prepared for. I guess indications were all at the time that there was a recession coming. So I think people were somewhat prepared for it. This is so unusual and unprecedented. The suddenness of it. We were all hearing about this and maybe thinking about it, but it really seemed to happen so suddenly, and it's affecting all markets, nationally, locally, internationally. So those are just sort of my kind of looking back and being part of this, kind of the differences that I've noticed with this pandemic.
It certainly has been sudden, and some of them start slow and recover slow. So we're hoping, maybe this is cockeyed optimism here, but if it's a sharp drop, we'll have a sharp rise whenever we start turning the corner.
Right.
Virginia, I want to ask your perspective, because you started Iron Horse just before the last downturn that Sarah was talking about, 2008.
And I think that from my perspective, the really big difference is I started noticing the drop off of the industry a year before and I kind of learned from that architects are the canary in the cage, first to go down and sadly also to recover. And so I took the last one seriously. I didn't act quickly. And so between the last one and this one is I, as a team, prepared for downturn, but also acted very quickly. So we lost 7 jobs in one day because we do have a lot of airline work that all dropped off. And then we had an aviation project also on hold. And so we did some critical cutting and are looking to figure out how to rehire people over time, but rather than cut people sitting around doing nothing, did reduce our staff. And but we had also started before this, even before the COVID thing, trying to diversify our markets, because we had a sense that regardless of whether COVID was going to happen, there's going to be a downturn. I just got off a board meeting with the DBIA National Board, and that has probably 16 super large construction companies. And consistently across the board, the big difference between last one and this one is most projects are going. I would say that in the construction world, maybe between 5 to 7% are stopping or slowing. But most of those are continuing to go on. Where these large mega companies are seeing the bigger issue is actually in 2021, 22. So pretty consistently across the large billion-dollar companies, they are looking at a 18-month to 24-month recovery. So we are taking that very seriously in what we're doing, and we are trying to grow very strategically. We're opening an office in LA right now. And that's because we have pre-established relationships with pre-established companies there. And so I think taking advantage of the relationships that you have, not being afraid to both cut and grow at the same time is really important. And I think a lot of people in the last recession did not cut fast enough, and a lot of them almost lost their businesses. And we're working with a couple firms across the country, and pretty consistently, everyone that I know that was going to make cuts cut about exactly at the same time, with the same intent of trying to keep cash flow going, keeping everyone at full, occupancy and full work, but still keeping the cash flow going in a responsible manner.
Well, it's interesting to me that you're also expanding into another market sector, and there's also a time frame to do that as well. If you wait until we're too deep into this, when there's not much hiring of architects going on by clients, you kind of missed that window too.
Mark Cuban.
Like a two-part strategy.
Yeah, so Mark Cuban did a lecture a couple of weeks ago on what to do in a downturn, and it was basically trim and grow. And so we're taking a bold step, but we do have relationships and projects already established. So we're not going where we don't have clients and relationships. That's really important.
Yeah, it's a strategic expansion, not a just let's, plant a flag and hope for the best.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Chad, I know when we've talked that we had a Chicago connection and that you had had some experience in the previous downturn and had connected with a friend of mine back in Illinois when you were looking for work in Chicago. So you've seen this from both sides now as a new graduate trying to enter the field when hiring is not awesome, and now as somebody who has a lot of people that you have hired.
Yeah, I mean, I think for our little practice, we're the beneficiary of a really strange set of circumstances. Because of our unique focus in affordable housing and actually homelessness of all things, that is currently a growth industry, and it was before the downturn, and I'm afraid it's only growing and becoming more vital. And we're seeing a tremendous amount of stress in all of our clientele as they're trying to deal with healthcare and spacing and supplies and all that kind of stuff, while there's simultaneously an infusion of development capital into the mix, both from federal, state, and local governmental sources, kind of flowing through nonprofits and kind of quasi governmental entities like housing authorities, for instance. So it's really stressful, I would say, for the set of dynamics that are set up, being an enormous demand, but there's not a lot of capacity to deploy resources in productive real estate manners just currently. And so different than the 2008 recession, which was like, it was kind of a financial cold stop. There was just an enormous withdrawal of capital and interest in development and the ability to execute anything. I think in this case, the capital markets are still moving freely and unrestricted. I think it's going to boil down to more like what Virginia was talking about, the supply chains ripple through the market, and also overcoming these short-term kind of labor / connection to material and process, and the technological hiccups of like the mute buttons and phone conferences or whatever. That'll all manifest in the future, but in the short term, like healthcare, I think I'm sure is experiencing the same kind of gluttony of need, with a diminished amount of capacity to address it, that I'm feeling in the affordable housing kind of homeless territory.
It's interesting that the sectors that are most driving the market right now are the ones that the pandemic has also revealed as the ones under the most stress, or the what society's greatest need is now is really on full display, and that's healthcare and housing, where before, lots of commercial stuff happening, lots of institutional stuff around, hospitality, tourism, air traffic, that sort of thing. So
yeah,
at some point we're going to have to come back and realign where the money flows, before we have another one of these shocks to the system.
Well, and that's happening right now. I think one of my great optimisms of this will be that that the commerce does start to flow through where these needs are somewhat differently, and maybe fundamentally differently as the awareness is put under the microscope, and it has been for the last 6 weeks at least, where you're hearing about senior centers who have outbreaks, and prisons and homeless encampments and things like that, hospitals obviously, And so the distribution of resources into those places is important. And I think at least in the short run here, there's some will to push resources in those directions. You know, we're not dealing with the forces of capitalism. I won't kid anybody in that way. There is some philanthropy that flows through this, but it's really more of a governmental prioritization that's happening. But the awareness around all of these topics is growing, and I'm optimistic that as an industry, if you can call it that, creating communities around you know, dignity and compassion and people and place is really important, and it's starting to elevate itself in the architectural lexicon for sure.
Yeah, the hopeful sign in all this is that architecture has something to contribute to what comes out the other side to make things better.
Yep.
Larry, you started a new firm, so either congratulations or condolences are in order for having your firm hang out a shingle in 2020. What's that experience been like?
Yeah, so I mean, I started in architecture a couple of years before the 2008 recession, and that was, you know, a huge education for me. I think I did a kind of informal study in economics as that was unfolding, because I was, you know, a young employee, really scared to death of losing my job, and trying to just understand what you know, all of this would mean. Luckily, I did manage to keep my job through that, but it was definitely a tough time for the firm I was at. I think the big difference that I'm seeing really here is, you know, the same thing that Chad is seeing, is that the capital markets are still functioning, and, you know, investment in real estate, investment in construction seems like it's not coming to this sort of hard stop the way that it did in 2008. And for me, you know, I had kind of a period of about a month and a half where inquiries just basically fell to nothing. But then in the last few weeks, that started to pick back up again. So that's really promising. I think I've definitely shifted from, you know, looking at a pretty broad spectrum of stuff, but kind of, you know, prioritizing medium to larger size single family residential projects, to now just knowing that it's going to be, you know, really small projects. And the last couple that I've picked up have been, you know, basement remodel and a small master bedroom addition to a house. So yeah, just looking at, you know, taking whatever little stuff comes and being, you know, maybe a little less picky.
Yeah, so the answer to the question when you get an inquiry of, do you do this kind of work, is probably yes, no matter what.
Always yes.
And there might be some people, I don't know if this is a consolation or not, but there are probably people on this call, either your fellow panelists or listeners, who are somewhat envious of your position right now, because, you know, not a big payroll to make, not a lot of overhead.
Yeah, so that's been another, you know, sort of very lucky factor for me, was that I, didn't start off trying to have any employees. I'm working out of my house already, so I didn't have to, you know, transition to working from home, and I don't have any kind of, overhead on that front. So yeah, I mean, I can functionally kind of hibernate, if you will, without it being, you know, dramatically impacting other people's lives, which I do feel very thankful for having that ability.
Sarah, I want to ask you, you know, as somebody who's in a top tier of management at your firm, obviously names on the door, and you're tasked with the joy or the displeasure of making a lot of tough decisions. What metrics are you using internally to stay ahead of this?
Well, you know, we don't really operate by metrics, really, which is kind of interesting to kind of admit. But, you know, we always have focused on just making our clients happy, you know, making sure that we're covering our bases in terms of taking care of projects, taking care of clients. I know that, you know, we certainly, our employees and our staff are of utmost importance. And we have, at this point, we kept our staff intact. We are being as nimble as possible in terms of, you know, taking on, and we always have had the ability to take on smaller projects as well as large projects, and the diversification of project types. You know, I know that, and again, I think that's born out of the fact that we have gone through a few recessions, but we've always, for example, had historic renovation, restoration projects. It seems like that's always that people tend to want to, you know, tackle during a recession. We've always, you know, taken on smaller projects, and I agree. We rarely will say no to a project right now in this time, and we're, like I said, fairly nimble in that respect. But you know, our you know, our clients are, again, the utmost importance, and we're just making sure that everybody's comfortably busy with billable work as much as possible. We are also we're doing some marketing and tidying up, you know, some things that we've put off for a long time, you know, in terms of just the stuff that you never want to deal with, you know, administratively or from a marketing standpoint. And, you know, we are keeping our office, you know, very informed as much as possible with, you know, we utilize Glip, which is similar to Slack, which allows people to, you know, have chatter back and forth, and, you know, really try to communicate as much as possible and on projects and with each other. But, you know, we're just kind of feeling our way through this, to tell you the truth. And it's, you know, it's nothing that I think it's fair to say that we certainly don't know exactly the right way to navigate through this, but we just sort of fall back on our instincts as to what's important at, you know, times like this. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Well, the depth of experience you've had means those instincts are more honed than others who may be going through this for the first time too.
Not to panic. I mean, I do think that, you know, it's certainly an instinct to kind of think you know, the bottom has dropped out, but I do think that there are capital markets out there that are going to come back, and as everybody just discussed, Josh and everybody, but that you know, I think there is a pent up demand, and it'll certainly kick in, and I feel confident. But again, I don't know. This is all new in a way. So
For sure. Well, Virginia, I know your business model is probably most active with clients throughout the whole construction phase. It's not just design, but you know, pre-design and all throughout. So I'm wondering, as you have a business that deals with clients in a number of different ways, besides architecture, what are you hearing from your clients? How are you keeping in contact with them? What are they looking for most right now in their partners on the A and C side? Hope you got to unmute there.
I was trying not to have background noise. So, you know, we have about a third of our work is actually aviation work. And so we, you know, as a company have been really affected, but is really essential to understand about that gargantuan market is it's getting some of the funds from the government, but they rely primarily on bonds. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, there isn't going to be any bond activity. And so for projects that rely on that, putting out new bonds, that is definitely going to be something that affects it. We are, you know, in terms of how we're working with our clients, because our clients are municipalities, private sector, and other companies, we are trying to be incredibly fair with what we're doing in terms of how we're partnering with people, trying to have a lot of foresight about how this is going to affect a project in the long term. How are we going to manage on a design build project? How are we going to manage the budget? Because we're getting absurd numbers right now, projects where there's a savings of 20 or 30% on early bids in some projects we have that are in 60% design. And while our clients want to take that savings, our contractors are not willing to actually give up that money because there's no way to know how long this is going to happen and what is going to happen to the materials and things like that. So I think we act a lot as a bridge between what is happening and what may happen and trying to help our clients manage the risk. And then clients where, you know, we have long-term relationships with them, a lot of it is just picking up the telephone and calling them and saying, you know, how are you doing? How are your kids? Having that personal touch with your clients, I think is really, really important. And we still are bringing, you know, work to our clients. So even if somebody comes to me like, I'm going to give you a call, Larry, because somebody came to me with a basement project and we don't do residential, so I'll give you a call. But if somebody comes to me with work that we can't do, I automatically call one of my teaming partners. And I feel like that is one of the things that's made us a success in the long term, because people know that we're not just in it for someone to give us something, but we are trying to be in it for the betterment of everybody on our team and as part of our industry. And, you know, because we work nationwide, a lot of times we'll have a client who brings us a project in Maryland, and we'll try to work with local small businesses there. That's something that we've been really consistently strong on is, you know, we got a lot of benefit from being a small business in Denver. And so we try to pass that on to other people. And so when we're doing a project in DC, we seek out other small businesses and try to help them grow and understand how to work in these large mega design build projects and things like that. Yes. But I think the most important thing is picking up the telephone, like not emailing, like really calling people and talking to them one-on-one. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. And people are so grateful to actually have someone to talk to when we're all sitting by ourselves all day long.
And that's not a new revelation, right? We've always heard that that's, you know, a best practice, but haven't had time to do it before. So it's times like these that give you a little bit of extra bandwidth to say, hey, you know what, I thought of you, this person, I'll just pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah, just for 5 minutes. But I do want to say that I think one of the things that's really tricky about this particular one, different than the other one, is that those of us that are working are actually working more. So this perception that we have all of this free time to cook, clean, learn a language, you know, seek out new kits, it's not necessarily true, because we're picking up a lot of slack from, you know, not being able to hire somebody yet because we don't have enough cash flow. And so making consistent effort in your marketing schedule to actually block out time that you don't give up to reach out to people is really important, because you can get sucked into handling 50 jobs at one time and actually never look forward. And we cannot stop looking forward and trying to make sure that we have that pipeline of work for the next 3 or 4 years and not just the next 3 or 4 months. That's it. I think we might have lost Mike.
I agree with you, Virginia. I think that personal connection in between our customers and our contractors that we're working with and our consultant teams, the municipalities, it is like a triple step when before it was like a 2-step, and we're handicapped because there's no empathetic connection of in person. You know, it's like you got to get this fucking technology to work right all the time, and and it's stressful sometimes, you know, especially when things are not running particularly smoothly. And you know, I think we're continually trying to figure out how to connect the dots for our clients and their constituents in ways that we might not have had to do or
Uh-oh.
Oh no, now we've lost Chad, I think.
Uh-oh.
professionals. We're also trying to steer our clients into situations where they may not have an awareness of the way the world is maturing, given the legislation that's happening like every other day. And the policies around that legislation is changing every single day. And, you know, so we've got a couple of folks in our office who are just like, their sole task is tracking that, so we understand it, so that we're ahead of the curve on leveraging it and not missing weeks or minutes when they're mattering right now.
I do want to say one other thing too, is I think, I remember when I first started my business, I actually talked to Sarah about running a business, and it was really helpful to me to have somebody to talk to. And I feel like sometimes as architects, we think we have to handle everything by ourselves. So I've got friends in other firms that, you know, as soon as this happened, I gave them a call and said, what do you think is going to happen? And just hearing from other people across the country that are in similar markets as you, that you're all going through the same thing together and trying to help each other. Like, we've helped a lot of firms figure out how to get that PPP loan and make sure that they knew they could get it, and, you know, turning our bank around and things. We have an awesome banker who helped us get it. But I think we collectively, and that's why this is good, have to not be afraid to actually ask for help from other people. Because I think that we think we should always be able to do everything by ourselves, but we cannot, and we won't survive as an industry if we don't rely on each other to strengthen all of us.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of the cool things about architects is we touch a lot of things that most of the people we deal with only touch an aspect of it. You know, we deal with the city and lenders and developers and engineers and contractors. So I think we're uniquely poised to collect a myriad of data inputs that are interesting. And we can synthesize that information into things that are helpful for kind of a 30,000 foot perspective, you know, the great dyslexic talent.
That's a good one.
So where my head has been for the last couple months, even just watching China slow down, you know, I was not feeling really good about supply chain, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term. And so I immediately started calling around, just starting to feel out if anybody was even hearing rumblings of disruption as it relates to, you know, shipping and manufacturing and time delays. And, you know, we've got 5 or 6 projects under construction right now, and I don't think there's been a single one that's been impacted by this yet, but it's coming. I mean, it's inevitable. Once it does, then I think the you know, your design build association or whoever you're talking about earlier, I think those metrics are that's the beginning of that ripple. And my experience with that in 2008 was, you know, once the construction timelines start to slip, then the stress really gets going because all of a sudden there's the liquidated damages and, you know, did you review the submittal timely and did you spec it right and whatever. And so like the investors of development are going to start asking the questions like, why is this slipping? In 2008, that was for sure the case. And the answer in 2008 was actually kind of simple. Everybody's stressed out and the subcontracting community is overextended from what they've taken on in terms of work and overextended in terms of what they can actually afford to do. But it just ripples into all of our business culture. And so I think one of the things that I'm always kind of thinking ahead about is how does this dynamic really play into our business ideas and our business culture? And how is our staff really anticipating this and playing defense now against those kinds of ideas in the future, so that we're way ahead of the curve in terms of our behaviors, setting a good tone with construction sites and with our developers, instead of finding ourselves behind a curve that there is no answer for. So, you know, in terms of the aftershock, what I'm anticipating next, that's going to be the part where this gets stressful.
How are you? Sorry to drop off for a little bit, but we're all adapting. Sounds like a great conversation happened in my absence. But how do you walk that fine line with keeping your company culture active and you know, the old phrase would be the lights on, the doors open, but if there's no office, that's not necessarily appropriate right now. But, you know, having a business that's there on the other side of the downturn, keeping your employees motivated while also saying, we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Well, I'll start just because I'm going on a roll. But, you know, Virginia said it's like we're not learning languages right now. Well, that's true. It's because we're trying to keep everyone connected. And, you know, Shopworks is a company of 20. And, you know, making 20 personal connections, which you can do in an office, you know, just by doing shoulder hocking, you know, just do a lap around the office and connect. And it takes 2 seconds. It takes 2 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes. Now we've got to like block time on the calendar for that. And it's not casual, and it's not like, you know, 3 people, you know, riffing on some kind of idea. It's like composed. Sucks. So the culture piece is a trick. And I think, you know, the relationships with our clients and, you know, pick up the phone. Well, the same thing with our staff and with our teams. Like the culture is communication and presence. And we don't have good communication and presence going right now. And so we got to overcome that with technology and with grit and with like working hard. I'm going to shut up now.
Sarah, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Gotcha.
Okay. I know. Same thing. We, you know, the lap around the office and hearing the chatter and, you know, back and forth. I mean, even when you're at your workstation and you're hearing about another project 3 desks, you know, 3 rows away, and it's just that kind of spontaneity of communication and how it just it's so much more efficient and natural, and there just seems to have you know, such a great outcome in terms of kind of feeling like you have a pulse on pretty much everything. And totally agree that this checking in with Zoom meetings and even having the fun, you know, Zoom happy hours, and we do stand-up meetings every week that we just talk about our projects, and we try to continue to do that through Zoom. But it isn't the same, and everybody is, I think, really missing that component. And it's just, you know, we've lost, you know, that's definitely a missing link, and in the overall kind of culture that we're dealing with these doing Zoom meetings and phone calls and stuff. So totally agree.
It's part of the client culture too, especially if you're in something like, say, single family residential market. You know, that first meeting drives the tone for that entire relationship, and it's hard to imagine that not taking place in person.
Yeah, we had our first interview this week, a pretty substantial job that we've known about for a while, you know, that we did as a interview. And, you know, it was, we knew most of the people behind the curtain, so to speak, and, but we didn't know everybody. And it's a very kind of odd way of communicating. And you certainly have to be, all set up and everything. I think everybody's navigating that pretty well. And I do believe that that's going to be what we're doing in the future, because most people are enjoying not getting on a plane and going to an interview and having that sort of crazy, schedule of meeting everybody in person. But it is a different, I think just like you said, meeting some, as an interview, meeting somebody for the first time, it's just an odd way to do it.
Do you think there are things that, even though we don't like them now, or it could be a forced innovation, that will stick around after all these stay-at-home orders are lifted and social distancing requirements are rolled back?
Yeah, I think these some of these interviews that people, for projects that require or ask for people to be, in different cities, it seems like there's such an efficiency of doing it, as a video meeting. I think that's going to continue to be just saving time, money, the environment, all the things the benefits of that. That's one thing. I'm sure there'll be many others.
I know for us, we've got, because we work in kind of a quasi-governmental arena, I found it to be really amazing to speak to planners from the city of Denver, for instance, from their home, or the Denver Housing Authority, which is a late technological adopter, has figured it out how to get software and technology to connect into servers and become effective across a lot of kind of remote situations. So one of the great things about this is I think that it's really forced folks who have been late to the technological table to really adapt. There is no choice unless you just take a sabbatical. And so the deterrents to communication, things like that, those are eroding. And I think I agree with what Sarah just said. Like, I'm not looking to get on an airplane. We've got a couple of projects out of town, and this is just almost as effective as being in person for the purposes of communicating. It's not like walking a job site, but it's pretty damn close. And so if we can reduce the strain on infrastructure with these technologies, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think on that note too, obviously I don't have employees right now, but I've been an employee, and I've worked at firms where there's kind of an attitude of like everybody needs to be at the office pretty much all the time, that they, aren't at a job site or aren't sick or something. And I think, among people my age, I feel like there's an increasing desire to have some flexibility to be able to work in the office when there's a value to that, but then to be able to work from home when there's a kind of, need for a bit of a mental recharge, being around the same group of, however many people, 40, 50, 60 hours a week can get really exhausting, especially for certain introverted types of people like myself. So I think, just having, I think, more options is what I'm hoping kind of as far as culture and architecture in general comes out of this, and kind of breaking down that sense of like, there's this one way that you work in architecture, and that's, sitting at your desk in your office 90% of the time.
Yeah, the default mode will certainly change.
While I agree with you, we basically set up the company because I was tired of sitting in an office 60, 80 hours a week working for somebody else. And so I try to create balance in the company. But what we have found really consistently is that our younger people need to be in the presence of the team in order to be able to learn everything. There's so much to learn, and our projects are only getting more and more complicated as they move forward with all the new energy requirements that are coming up in the next code. And our clients are demanding more and more from us, and our contractors are demanding more and more from us, and we're getting paid less fee to do it. And in the meeting I was just in, pretty consistently across the board, all the contractors said that design remotely is not working for them. And so while I think it does work to be able to create the flexibility that if you need to stay home, you can, I also feel that it has really shown how important it is for us to be able to work together and mentor each other, like the young people mentoring us in technology and how to turn Zoom on, but also, you know, us with the 40 years experience being able to say, oh, don't forget you have to vent that TV that you put in the wall, and if you don't, it's going to blow up. So, you know, those kind of things where there's no way somebody who is told put a recessed TV in a wall is going to think, oh my God, I actually have to ventilate that somehow. Those little things are essential to the success of us as an industry. So, you know, we're already looking at doing phased work where we have people every other day in the office, so we don't exceed 10, and people are still able to work together and get that learning. And then we're putting a lot more pressure on our project managers to check in with every single person, some of them a couple times a day, just to make sure that the young interns are doing what they're supposed to be doing correctly and they know what to do. So I do think that some of the stuff is really good, like the interviews where not everyone has to fly 1,000 miles to get to them. But I also think that it has shown how important it is for us to be able to work together to mentor and create the next level of our successors going forward.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of questions coming in from the audience. I want to get to those now. And the first one that's sort of related to this is, have you given thought to how you open the offices back up and what that looks like? Sarah, you.
On that, I think tomorrow, and we're going to involve our whole office in that discussion. But again, we're going to follow the guidelines, whatever the governor puts forth. But I can see coming in, you know, 10 people, like Virginia said, you know, in rotating people. One of the things that we found is most people, even though most people have laptops but most of the people in our office took home their towers and their 2 monitors, you know, so that they are set up, you know, at home, but just like they were at the office, and in terms of the speed of the computers and the 2 screens. And so it was interesting because we didn't think through the fact that those, you would have to be back, you know, would you take those back and forth from your home to your office, you know? So we're going to have to resolve how that actually happens. But I think the idea is to roll in, you know, groups of people at a time that feel comfortable doing it. But we haven't really come up with exactly what our plan is. Anyway, there'll be some logistics to it for sure.
It's a good part of the plan that you're having it as a firm-wide conversation and not coming in with the dictate. We've got it all figured out and here's how it's going to work starting Monday.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and we've been talking to a lot of our employees because we have some people that have extra pressure because they are parents and some are single parents. And so they not only are trying to teach their kids and work full-time without any support, or they're 2 working parents who both, you know, so now you've got 3 different people on the internet at one time. So we're trying to figure out how, and especially because a lot of those women are our leadership, how can we help them continue to work effectively while still trying to parent at the exact same time? So we've asked our team to try to be flexible to work with those people. So if they're teaching from, you know, 9 until 2, you know, can they have a meeting at 6 o'clock with their team, and trying to set that up earlier so that people aren't surprised they have to have a meeting during dinner. But that way, we're trying to figure out ways of taking pressure off the overachieving people in the office who are trying to do everything. But, you know, the issue is with that specific group, they're going to have to be at home probably most likely all summer. And so we're working really hard to figure out how can we support them How can we take the pressure off of them? How can the rest of the team support them to make sure that they can succeed? Because they're the ones who are leading our projects. And so, and so we've been kind of interviewing people and trying to find out, what do you need? And almost like creating specific programs for different people who are in different positions, so that we can make everybody productive, but also keep people healthy and mentally sane.
And it's not just schools that'll be closed, it's probably every summer camp opportunity too. So that those parents are really going to be in a fix, and you hope to heck this doesn't happen, but we certainly don't want a discriminatory environment where, if you're deciding between, which employee to keep on and which you don't, and like, well, we really can't get as much out of this person because they've got kids at home. So I hate to be negative, but firm principals really need to keep that in mind, that, be flexible for people that have a variety of other pressures going on in their lives.
Yeah, I'd echo all of that. I think for us, it's, we're really tracking carefully all of that kind of stuff, the family dynamic versus the singles in our office. They're all dying to get in the office because they're lonely and bored out of their mind, and work is an outlet for that, and it's a collaborative thing, and it's a big part of their life, and it's been kind of extracted. So I think at least through the summer, my sense is this will probably be with us a year maybe, and in these kinds of rotations and the weekly cycle of time on versus time off versus family life, the interconnections of all of this is visceral in a way it's never been in my career. So, I've got kids walking around in the back, and they're microwaving stuff and, arguing with each other and trying to do work and whatever. So, so it's a big part of it. And I think all of us just need to find the grace of compassion to pass along to our staff. And I like what Sarah said at the very beginning, we got to have a little bit of courage here and not panic. It's not the end, it's just different. And I don't know, we'll get through it.
I did want to mention one other thing that I heard on this other call I was on today, is that construction companies, they've had to make a huge amount of changes. But one of the things they're doing is they're working 410s. And the reason they're doing that is if there is someone who is found to be infected, the site will have 3 days of rest. And so that's something that we're going to actually talk about, whether we're going to try to work, 410s and then have Fridays off, or just have everyone work from home on Fridays, so that the physical office has time to, decontaminate. And we also have a really rigorous decontamination program already set up with like white gloves and masks and all that stuff. But we're actually having trouble finding masks to provide the employees when they actually come back to the office. And so that's going to be one of the limiting factors for us, is finding masks that we feel are safe and comfortable for them to wear for 8 hours a day.
Well, and if you follow the recommended guidelines of the temperature check before coming into a workplace, there's going to be a big demand on those, thermal scanners that you check people's temperature. We're part of a group that meets on a regular basis. It's called A3LC. It's basically architects, engineers, and contractors. And that meeting just took place yesterday. We heard a lot of comments about how people are preparing for coming back to work, and similar to what you were saying, Virginia, about the staging of the schedules. One was dividing into 2 teams and doing a week on and a week off. I think, Chad, you were mentioning that as a possibility. Another was, Monday, Tuesday is one group. You have a rest day Wednesday where there's a cleaning crew that comes in. A second group comes in Thursday, Friday, then Saturday, Sunday. It has another rest period. So I think you're going to find a lot of different approaches tried by people over the course of this, ramp up. But the takeaway that I got out of that was it's not the method, it's that it's a phased in approach. So you try something, and as the restrictions start to loosen a little bit, you iterate and adapt from there.
I think another thing we've got to be cognizant of, luckily for me, this isn't sort of my personal problem, but I think for all of you who are running offices with employees, is that over the course of this coming year, there may very well be reintroductions of restrictions, including something as severe as what we've been going through for the last month. So until we really get a vaccine for this, I think it's going to be pretty rocky.
Yeah. I'm going to do a couple of questions with a quick show of hands and end with a third question. So I'll put the last one out first so you can think about it before we get to it. But it is very much tied to this. If it's going to last months, maybe another year or more, how do you keep your team determined for this very long journey that is likely to get harder before it gets easier? So think on that, and that's where we'll end the conversation today. But between now and that answer around the panel, a couple other questions that we had real quick is, have you used the stimulus plans? You know, how many have applied for the Paycheck Protection or the other program and gotten it successfully? Anybody been able to do that?
We've applied and received the plan, the protection plan funds. So it was pretty seamless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
me
Virginia.
too. And I want to say that it was because we have a local small bank. So if you're working with like the big banks like Chase and Wells Fargo, I would highly recommend moving to the smaller bank because our application was seamless and they helped us the whole way through and we got funded within 2 days of approval. So, and compared to all of my other friends who applied that were at the bigger banks, a lot of them did not get funded. And so I've seen pretty consistently with local Colorado banks that they've had a lot more success in getting funded.
Yeah. Although we had, Chase was our bank, and because we've been a long time client of theirs, we were able to get through pretty quickly. It was interesting because I've heard the same stories. And, but anyway, I think relationships again are huge.
Absolutely.
Support.
Yep.
And then are you seeing any job sharing or joint ventures on staff exchange? You know, if one of your studios is not super busy right now, but there's another firm that can use those folks, are you seeing any of that taking place?
I mean,
We haven't, but we work with other firms like all the time, but this is oddly not at all.
Yeah, a friend of mine who didn't have experience in residential work, but was, had someone approach her about a project, did contact me about doing a joint venture, and unfortunately that whole project didn't end up happening, but yeah, I could see something like that happening as this goes on.
Well, I'm really gratified to go back to a comment earlier that Virginia made about, just you're reminded about the interconnectedness of the professional network and how you can refer to other people when you're not able to take that on and help people through this time together. I don't think there's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the foreseeable future, but we might see more cross-firm referrals and maybe even some job sharing as time goes on.
Absolutely.
So I want to get back to that question that is top of mind for, I think, any owner of a firm and anyone who has any amount of payroll or mentoring role to take on. And that is how to keep your colleagues and your team determined for the long journey.
I can kick it off. I mean, I think to me, it's engaging folks in meaningful work. Purpose and values and the reason we get up in the morning and practice is a big part of the life of an architect, and I think we got to remind ourselves of that. It's not just a job. Architects don't animate for a job. They're, it's like connecting with meaningful work. And so so to me, it's like trying to convey the idea that, you know, we're in this time of uncertainty, we're in this time of reset. But the health and welfare of, in our case, Shopworks is linked to everybody's contributions to that. And that's a short-term question. What are we doing today? What are we doing, you know, in the next 10 minutes? And it's also a long-term question of, you know, how do we emerge from this when the world's less idiotic? And, you know, and we want to have affirmative answers to both of that. And I think, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to talk to our folks about their role in all of that, because their role is important. And especially in this time of communication difficulty, you know, we have folks on our staff who are like the classic introverted individual, and like getting them out of their shell is a big part of it. And getting, you know, you can't be comfortable. It ain't comfortable. And this is all going to suck for a while. So let's just acknowledge that it's uncomfortable for everybody, and we're going to have to rework and rethink it. But if we connect to the why of why we do this, I think that's really important. And I think it's also kind of liberating for folks who are struggling with that a little bit, to say that I have some power and franchise over how this works for me, and it's in the context of the company and in the context of our community and the, you know, and the clients we're working with.
Yeah, we fortunately, I have an amazing operations director who has implemented every single one of the policies that we would be doing in the office remotely. So this week we're doing goal setting, checking in on people who, you know, how are they doing on their testing. We do yoga on Monday mornings. We do meditation on Thursday afternoons. We have happy hour. We check in regularly. So we're trying to keep, the reason that people come to work for us is because of how we work and who we work for and the difference we can make in the community. But I'm really fortunate that I've got people who all buy into that. So all my leadership backs that up, and we work really hard to make sure people know that their work is meaningful and impactful, even if they're just picking up red lines on toilets, and which every intern has to do. But I also was noticing on the list of attendees, there's a lot of people here who that I meet with on the WLI, the Women's Leadership Group, other principals, and just having that, you know, have people that you can talk to, and making sure that your employees have people they can talk to. So even if they're not talking to other people in the firm, if they have other people in the industry they're talking to, so trying to keep those connections open and make them feel fulfilled.
Yeah, I think thinking of this time as a time for innovation and change that's going to happen through this and from this. I know we do a lot of performing arts spaces, and we're, you know, the ideas of thinking of how you have large gatherings in the future, and, you know, how are you going to solve that? And you know, it's just kind of a great time to be innovative and creative and think differently. And I think we're all thinking differently about a lot of things. And, you know, just even how this is impacting our environment. Is it positive? Yeah. Is it something we can sustain? You know, I don't think so. And, you know, what does that all mean? And I think people are using this time too to kind of expand how they're the view of almost everything. So it's kind of an interesting opportunity in a way.
Yeah, I would agree with what everybody else has said, and I think Virginia really hit it on the head earlier, talking about, you know, having individual conversations with all of her employees about what their specific situation is and what needs to be done to help keep them, you know, able to work. And I think being motivated is a part of that kind of individual approach as well. I think, you know, of all the architects I know, it's a vast difference in what people's work situations are at home. You know, some people have kids, some people's partners are there working as well. And so there's just all this chaos of a million Zoom calls and children running around. And then other people are, you know, like Chad was saying, you know, single and they're lonely and they're just wanting that connection. So I think just, you know, dealing with everybody on their individual level, probably even more so than in a normal circumstance.
Well, profit definitely keeps these businesses running, but you don't need money to have passion or purpose. And so I think that's something that will come out of this. If people didn't have it before, if they were just cranking out production, now's the time to find that passion, that purpose, and double down on it. And hopefully the money will come sooner or later. I know one thing that I hope doesn't go away after this is all done is the chance to have these kind of conversations, because they've been certainly very rewarding to be able to facilitate these on behalf of the profession. And I hope for our attendees who are listening remotely, it took an excuse of this pandemic to move to the virtual content and to have these gatherings take place when they would normally just happen maybe at the annual conference or a couple other times a year. But I hope this is a new normal for us going forward, no matter what else is happening in the world. And great job for all of you for helping to provide that insight. We're really grateful for it. And this is not the last time. Next week, we have larger firm principals who will be having a similar conversation. And then on Friday, a couple more notes that we have. We're doing a joint session with the AGC with contractors on design inspections during this time. So look for that on our website, and all future content on the calendar section of our website. That'll be, those next two are going to be at noon. So Friday at noon, next Wednesday at noon. And if you missed anything on this conversation or want to go back and revisit a detail of what took place, we will have it recorded, and Megan can help you retrieve that. We are, again, very thankful for Sarah, Larry, Chad, and Virginia for their time, and we wish you well. And we're glad to see you still smiling and hanging in there. And we hope to see everybody else in the virtual world as well. Take care. Have a great rest of the week.